You're on the clock with Tyler Jennings and Jared Perkins, a Prospects Live podcast for everything MLB draft related. Join us as we discuss the biggest stories from college and high school baseball, bring you interviews from your favorite draft prospects, and break down live looks with Prospects Live analysis across the nation. Get ready, because you're on the clock with Tyler Jennings and Jared Perkins.
All right, what is going on, everybody? You are on the clock, powered by Prospects Live. The podcast is going to bring you everything you want MLB draft related. I'm Jared Perkins. That's Tyler Jennings. We are very excited to get launched today. But Tyler, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Glad to be back and finally get done with that break that we had for, like a month and a half at least. So very excited to get this underway.
Yeah, we're excited to bring you this podcast on the clock. It's going to be our new MLB draft podcast hosted by Prospects Live. We're going to bring you everything you want related to the MLB draft, the biggest stories from college and high school, bring you some interviews from your favorite draft prospects and college coaches. We have a ton lined up already, so we're excited for that. And we're also going to have Prospect Live analysts from across the nation on the podcast to talk some live looks and break down some of the players that they're seeing across the U.S. So we're really excited about it. Tyler, are you ready to launch this thing?
Let's do this thing.
All right. I think we should start kicking it off with the 2023 debuts, of course. We've had an incredible draft class, probably one of the best draft classes we've had overall in a long time. We had Dylan Cruz, Paul Skeens, Walker Jenkins, a bunch of others at the top. But what are some of the biggest shocks for you early on? So two players that have been off to a hot start, and maybe some guys who've struggled early on.
Yeah, so for me, I kind of went down the carpet line on this one. Obvious first one, Walker Jenkins, local kid with me, about 2 hours from here. Really, really good debut. I think it was something like a 362 average with like a near 1,000 OPS and 100 something at bats. And he just looked really good. I know in his first couple games he had Paul Skeens and struck out, which, it's Paul Skeens. Like, it's a high school kid that's never seen 100 before. Like, it's going to happen. But
yeah,
hit 3 home runs, stole 6 bases. The swing's very, very good. I love the swing with Walker Jenkins. It's just a matter of, like, we've talked about it before, the injury risk. He's had hip issues in the past. He had a broken hamate last summer. If he can stay healthy, this is a very, very talented young man. And I think, if I remember correctly, it was something like 9 walks to 14 strikeouts. So he's already got pretty advanced plate discipline and approach. So I'm going to really, really enjoy having him in the Twins organization, because that's a really good fit for him. They have that MO for like the power and hit mix with some of the sluggers they've recently drafted. Yeah. Some of them really haven't worked out, but I think with Jenkins, you're going with the best upside out of the whole group that they've had, and I think everything's going to work out perfectly. Cole Emerson was the other one. He was an interesting one, actually. He beefed up a little bit over the winter. And there were some teams that actually had him pretty high up on their boards. There were some that had him higher than Walker Jenkins at times. He ended up going to Seattle at 22. Really lit up single A, like 374 average, OPS over 1,000, 2 home runs. He can slice the gaps pretty easily. It's a very fun player to kind of dive into. And I think this is going to be something that Seattle is going to enjoy, because they're really stacked on the infield with prospects like Cole Young, Ty Pete. There's some others there that off the top of my head, I can't really remember because I'm tired, but they've got a stockpile going on in Seattle, and Cole Emerson might just be the best of the bunch. In terms of someone that has struggled a little bit, I'd probably have to go with Sammy Safira. Granted, this is a small sample size, so really we're kind of just looking at the stat line essentially. But Sammy Safira basically just did rookie ball this year, batting at 0.71 with a 402 OPS. Not really the greatest, but it's also 42 at bats. I'm not going to knock him for it, but it's a bit of a shock, especially considering the fact that we thought he was probably one of the at least a first round pick. We had him somewhere in like the back end of the 20s on our mock draft, and he fell to 43 to the Reds. Just hasn't worked out yet, but like I said, 42 at bat sample size. We're not looking too far into it. He should be able to get into at least low A, maybe even high A in 2024.
You don't get into those 42 plate appearance sample sizes that everybody freaks out early on?
No, there's no need. There's a thing called triple S, it's
Yeah.
super small sample size. I'm not one of those people that kind of looks too much into that. So I'll give him a chance. And hey, if he performs next year, so be it. He's got the potential to definitely do that.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Colt Emerson. What the Seattle Mariners did in that last draft, I mean, it was incredible getting Ty Pete. Then they went late, took Teddy McGraw, who got injured, another kind of high upside arm too. I mean, their entire draft to me was impressive.
Absolutely. And shout out Ty Hollow for the haul he had here in Central North Carolina. He's the area scout for Seattle here, and he did a fantastic job both in terms of getting people drafted and also undrafted free agency guys. Like, he got a couple of Campbell guys. I think Jared Belvin was one of them, and he was the first 2020 guy in Campbell's history. So he did a very good job. So shout out to Ty. I don't know if you'll listen to this, but did a great job, buddy.
Yeah, so some of the guys that I had, first, Matt Shaw. I mean, he absolutely tore it up as soon as he got to the Cubs. Hit 357, 400 on base percentage, 8 home runs, 15 stolen bases. I got to see him a few times when I was out in Maryland. The one series I saw him against Rutgers, I was watching the swing. He was just getting beat by fastballs, could not pick up spin. And I was like, oh, not too sure about this guy the first round. But of course, gets right to the pros, fits right in. But the one thing about Shaw is he's an absolute grinder. Like, that guy is out there playing hard every single day, wants to win games, wants to make it to the major leagues. So he's been quite impressive, and one guy I've really watched. Another guy I kind of flew under the radar for me a little bit. I know he's at Grand Canyon. He got overlooked a little bit with Jake Wilson there, but Homer Bush Jr., who was taken in the 4th round by the Padres, already has 22 stolen bases on the year, hitting 325 with a 422 BP and then an 861 OPS. He's been quite impressive with plus speed, has the ability to defend in center field. So, and you look at the Padres development, I mean, that's a guy you want to see kind of flourish just because of the way the Padres have been able to develop their prospects in the past. And both these guys are already in Double-A, which is a kind of a trend we've seen in this draft class, especially.
Yeah, there's been a lot of guys that have been really pushed up aggressively. What was it, like Hurston Walters already in AAA, Wyatt Langford's in AAA, which is to be expected. It was a very good draft class. We'll touch on this more later, but I think the 2024 draft class, in terms of at least like the prep side, is a bit on the weaker side, but the college side is very deep and very heavy. So, like I said, we'll touch on it later, but I would imagine that's a trend that will continue into next year as well with some of the 2024 draftees.
Yeah. The one guy I had that did not perform well was Kansas City Royals catcher Blake Mitchell. As a Royals fan, had to bring this one up because I was on the Blake Mitchell train, not the Blake Mitchell train, but at least the defending Blake Mitchell pick train during the draft. He has hit 147, 13 games only though, but he did have a 423 on base percentage. He walked 17 times in 13 games, struck out 14 times. I mean, it's just a prep bat who's being patient at the plate, right? Probably too patient, just trying to get adjusted to pro ball. You see a lot of Royals fans who are freaking out already about his 13 game sample size. Should have taken Kyle Teal. Thing that we heard during the draft as well. But Mitchell's a guy who's a high upside risk prep catcher. We all knew it coming out of the draft, but the Royals, for a team who doesn't have a top 100 prospect, you see why they went Blake Mitchell and then Blake Walters in the first 2 rounds, just because they wanted to hopefully hit on some of these high upside guys so they can have top 100 prospects. That was my take on it, but I know a lot of people were like, we should have went safe. But you also see the year before when they did go safe, they got Gavin Cross, who's had his struggles. So I don't know. It's 13 games. I'm not ready to write Blake Mitchell off yet.
No, and it's the same thing with Safira. It's too small of a sample to really look into it. Like you mentioned, 17 walks in 13 games. That's really impressive.
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt about that. And like the thing is with Mitchell, it's like personally, I thought Mitchell had more upside than Teal did because I felt like Teal's he definitely advanced himself as a catcher at Virginia. Yeah. There was no doubt about it. He got there pretty stiff, and we talked about it in the group chat before, where he was stiff defensively, but like really, really good offensively, and then it kind of like swapped a little bit while he was on campus, because there is some stiffness to his swing, but I mean, Kyle Teal is just really, really good. So, but with Mitchell, it's like was really explosive. He's got a loud arm. He has pretty good power. And he's been able to get up to like 97 with a hammer breaking ball on the mound, which you probably won't see at all
No,
in the
right.
minors, but it's fun to talk about. But with the Royals, they had to kind of take that aggressive nature with their draft strategy, just with the fact that you mentioned there's no top 100 prospects, it's a new regime. Try and mix it up a little bit. Don't go to safe route. Try and go out there and make a statement. If you can trust your development team to get everything done, and plus they've done a pretty good job bringing in guys that know what they're doing. Brian Bridges
Yeah.
is the new scouting director there. Brian Bridges is an amazing human being. He's behind much of what the Braves have now. He's been with the Giants for the past couple of years, but he's a very smart person, knows what he's doing. He's a perfect fit for that job, and I think he's going to do a very, very good job as a result.
Yeah. And to me, it seems like no matter who they picked, they wouldn't have been satisfied. I mean, the year before they went Gavin Cross, Caden Wallace for the first two. Took them to save college bats, so they got praised for that. But then all of a sudden, as soon as Gavin Cross doesn't hit the ground running in the second year, Royals are getting flack for taking the wrong guy, even though at the time of the draft, everybody's like, oh, that's a smart choice. But
Yeah.
it's hard.
No, and that's the thing. Scouting is not easy.
Yeah.
It's never easy. You're going to be wrong 99% of the time, and you're going to have to live with that. Like, honestly, like even with some of the stuff that we'll talk about later with our lists that are coming out here, I'll miss on guys that will probably they're not even on the list now. They'll probably be like top 10 guys in July. So
Yeah.
like,
But I even think about when I saw Shaw at Rutgers. He probably had one of his worst series of the entire. But you watch the bigger sample size over his entire season. Yeah, I'm going to make the judgments I do based on that series, but I don't think that one series is telling of the kind of player he's going to be in the future.
yeah, absolutely. Like I saw Dylan Cruz and Wyatt Langford struggle at South Carolina. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that they're not top 5 draft guys. Like Langford could probably was probably the best outfield prospect in the game right now at this point.
It's
And I
insane
don't
what he's
think
doing.
that's an exaggeration. Like we had discussions of like maybe we think about putting Langford at 1 on our 2023 list over Cruz and then like Skeens 3. Just because the only thing that we kind of lacked with on Langford was how good is the arm? Is it good enough to stick in center?
Mm-hmm.
We thought it wasn't because it's more average, and Dylan Cruz has a plus arm out there. So it was like I feel like Langford's going to get relegated to left field, but the bat's so good, you kind of ignore the fact that the arm's more average than anything.
Yeah.
So we were definitely in that limbo for a bit, but hey, here we are. Wyatt Langford's in AAA, so I can't say anything. Like,
Yeah.
he's just been absurd this year.
But at like some point too, when you look at Langford and Cruz, you're looking for things to separate them, right? Or little things that are going to put one guy over the other, but they're so both talented that it's really hard to do.
Yeah, and I feel like when you get to some of like the higher end guys too, as the year goes on, you start looking for stuff that they kind of struggle with more than anything. Like you already know how good they are, but now you're trying to like not trying to say nitpick, but you're trying to figure out like, okay, how well does he handle spin? How well does he move in the outfield? All the little things that kind of matter in terms of development, you kind of start looking more towards instead of like, oh, hey, by the way, he just hit a ball 115, 500 feet. Like, that stuff happens. You're more looking for some of the stuff that you can work on as a dev team and see what you can improve from there.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that kind of wraps us up a little bit for the 2023 class debuts. We're moving into 2024. We're planning to bring you this podcast bi-weekly because it's off season right now, not as much is happening. And then once we kick off probably the college season, we'll get going weekly. And then as we move up to the MLB draft, we'll continue to go weekly as with you, just to bring you some of the biggest news stories. But Tyler, for you, are there any big news stories happening right now in the off season?
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing was the transfer portal.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of names that kind of went through, and we got a couple here that you've already gone over. One of them that I really enjoyed, Chase Burns. So, what's the easiest way I could put this? I'm a very big Chase Burns stan. Absolutely love yeah, it's like it's an electric factory. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, love the fastball slider combination. I feel like the changeup and the curveball are going to come along at some point. And he's in the perfect place to do it now with Wake Forest. He's going to be paired with Josh Hartle and probably Michael Massey in that rotation. But the biggest thing like that I'm looking for is how does command improve this year? There were times where his command kind of fell out of whack a little bit. He's going to be given the starting role. There's no doubt about that. It's the only reason why he kind of went there. But how does the command do over, say, 5-6 innings like to start the game instead of 5-6 innings and the 4th inning or 5th inning or something like that. So I kind of want to see how that goes. I like it. Like the day it got announced, I was at work in the cash office, and I texted someone earlier in the day. I was like, "Well, I think Chase Burns might be TCU bound, or like I don't know if Wake Forest really has much to do there because I just didn't feel confident that was going to happen."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you get the Kendall Rogers report. It's like, "Oh, hey, by the way, he's going to Wake Forest," and I just did laps in the cash office at work. I was so happy.
Going to the pitching factory. I mean, makes sense.
No, it's like I don't have to drive 6 hours to Knoxville now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I still might, but
Advantage for you.
a little bit. Yeah, it's great to have that kind of firepower in the ACC now because really the ACC, when you think about it, there's not a ton of like high upside flamethrowers in the conference. Last year, I can only think of a couple guys like Davis Palermo was up to like 97, 98 for UNC in the bullpen. There weren't a ton of starters that were really up there in terms of velo. They were all mainly like low 90s or upper 80s, or you can be like NC State where all your guys are throwing like 86, 88. So I don't know. It's like it's nice having a power arm in this conference for once. And even like another one that we've talked about in the past is Braden Montgomery, who's probably the biggest transfer in the entire country. Texas A&M might have the best outfield in college baseball right now with Jay Laviolette, and they had like a transfer from Penn, I do believe.
Mm-hmm.
Or it was an Ivy League school. I can't remember his name right now, but that outfield looks very, very scary in College Station right now.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest. If you had to pick like an impact bat and arm, those two guys are probably the biggest transfer impacts this year.
100%. And like Braden Montgomery is going to be pitching in College Station. I don't know what role he'll be in because he struggled with command at Stanford. Pure relief, hasn't been able to throw strikes, but he's also been up to 98 as a freshman. He's been more like 90, 93 this year with a good cutter and a good changeup. You can put him in a closing role.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead, have fun. Like,
yeah.
You're not winning the game unless he starts walking everyone, but I kind of trust Slosnagel's development team and getting him to throw strikes this year.
Reminds me of when I was at ASU, they had Jordan Swaggerty, and he would catch, and then he would go and close games out. And so he's like the backup catcher, would close, throw 98.
Will Craig did the same thing too at Wake Forest. Yeah. I think he was like their third baseman or first baseman, and then it was like, oh, hey, by the way, here's our closer. He's Will Craig.
Good luck.
Yeah. And then it's like now he's most remembered for the Hobby Bias play.
Yeah. Sounds great. Right?
That was brutal to watch.
I'd say the one arm that was sticking out to me, because everything LSU does sticks out to me at this point, just because they do everything. And getting Luke Holman from Alabama, like you lose Skeens, you lose Ty Floyd, but your rotation's got Thatcher Hurd now, and now you have Luke Holman in there. I mean, it never stops. It seems like for LSU, they just keep getting in, and then they had a couple prep arms that they got to top out their class, and it's insane what they have really done and kind of capitalized in terms of NIL, in terms of transfer portal as well, and the program that they've built. It's incredible.
No, Jay Johnson's done a very good job of that, and the transfer portal has been his best friend. Not to like Cam Johnson's now on campus for the next 3 years. Chase Shores, albeit he won't pitch this year, but he's a highly talented prospect for next year's class. And then this year, like the 2024 recruiting class that they have is stupid good.
Yeah,
and to be honest, I don't think they're done yet. There's still a couple of Noah Franco is still out there on the recruiting trail. They just got William Schmidt from Mississippi State a couple days ago. Ryan Costello from Pitt. They got a lot of firepower coming in, and I feel like if they can survive the draft next year, they're in good shape for years on years on years at this point.
Yeah, it's wild to me too, because like I know Jay Johnson down from his Nevada days, right? He was there for 2 years, won like 45 games, went to Arizona, went to a College World Series, and then all of a sudden gets to LSU. Brings that team to a College World Series championship, and now he just has built a dynasty basically. And if you're a draft prospect coming out of high school, you're going to go to the minors or you're going to go to LSU, where you're potentially going to win a College World Series. You're going to have that kind of better than minor league baseball experience for 2 to 3 years or however long you decide to stay there. It's almost like, why would you not go if you're being recruited by LSU?
No, NIL has made this possible too. Like, I want to say now with the payment process they do with the draftees with the bonuses and whatnot, is like you get half at some point, half
Yeah.
later. I could be wrong on that. If somebody wants to correct me on that, feel free. But that's definitely going the NIL route is better than doing that at this point. I hope at some point they can, fix that and get affordable housing and affordable pay for every single minor leaguer at some point. We're going to see how that goes. I know they're going to talk about the antitrust exemption in either Congress or Supreme Court, one of the two.
I believe it's the Supreme Court is doing it.
Supreme Court, okay.
Yeah, Congress has done some things in terms of like investigations and trying to get information from Major League Baseball about it, like the Senate Judiciary Committee. But yeah, it's all been Supreme Court.
Okay, yeah. Hopefully, we'll get a ruling on that soon because I definitely want to see minor leaguers get paid properly at this point. Same for draft guys. Like, I feel like the money's limited going into the draft now, and they kind of really do need to fix that, especially with NIL being what it is now. Because, hell, Tommy White's probably getting $1 million plus in NIL money right now, and he'll probably earn another like $4 to $5 million next summer if everything works out. So it's like he's doing very, very good at this point with financials.
Yeah, that's what the game's become. I know, and like, I of course have opinions on it, but I always we're reporting the draft and the transfer portal. Like, that's what we're doing. We have opinions on it for sure, but like, this is what the game is right now. And unfortunately, you can complain about it all you want, but it's not going to change over the next couple of years. It's basically where we're at.
Yep. And it's just the way it is now. Like, you got to adapt, otherwise you're going to get left behind. And NC State is one of them. I think everybody knows my fandom at this point, but like another transfer that really stuck out to me this year was Cannon Peebles going to Tennessee. Tennessee did not have a catcher last year. Jared Dickey was more of like an outfielder, and they replaced him with a couple other guys, but they didn't really have like a set in stone catcher.
Yeah.
Cannon Peebles is now that catcher. He's very good. He put up some ridiculous stats at NC State. If I remember correctly, he went like 6 for 6 one day with like 2 homers, 2 doubles early in the season. It's a very proven bat. And he was blocked by Jacob Cozart. That was the main reason. It was just he wasn't going to crack the roster as a catcher. He was probably going to DH in first base again. But, first base is held down by Eli Serrano, who's draft eligible this year. Yeah. Jacob Cozart's one of the best catchers in the game. He doesn't really have a fit in the field unless you stick him in the outfield. So, it felt inevitable. And Tennessee solved their problem very, very quickly. So I got to give props to Tony Vitale on that one. He got a very, very good bat, Cannon Peebles. And I think Peebles is 2025 eligible. So he's got 2 years in Knoxville. Like, this is going to be a very, very fun lineup next year with Blake Burke and Christian Moore. Drew Beam's going to be the Friday night ace in Knoxville. So it's going to be very fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, even for the big schools who are able to kind of do this and build up their teams, it makes it really hard for the smaller schools to develop and have a competitive team. I mean, you look at Sac State, lost their freshman All-American shortstop. I went to the University of Nevada, Reno, where I worked for the baseball team, and like, they had a head coach in TJ Bruce who left to go to TCU to be an associate head coach. So it's like he's leaving a head coaching job to basically become an assistant at TCU because it's in a bigger conference. They have a bigger budget. He's able to probably do more things in terms of recruiting and stuff like that. And to make that leap from a small conference to a big conference isn't easy. So like, if you have a chance to become an associate head coach versus being an actual head coach in a small conference, you're probably taking that opportunity.
Oh yeah, no. And that's what some of the players do too, is like, you're going from, okay, you've dominated a mid-major. How would you do in the SEC? Yeah. Or how would you do in the ACC? Like, it's a competitive advantage with SEC being the best conference in the entire country, at least in my opinion. And I think a lot of people would agree on that. Like, the SEC is 1 and ACC is probably number 2, maybe Big 12. But even then, it's kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, and going from that small school to the big school kind of takes us into our next topic. We're going to do a little Cape Cod roundup. So kind of guys who took their game to the next level, biggest surprises, some people who struggled. For me, speaking of small school going to big school, the guy that really kind of stuck out to me in the Cape Cod was Seaver King. Small sample size, played 16 games, but really tore it up. There was a lot of question marks whether his tools would translate coming from a small school and trying to go play in a bigger conference. But he really showed that he can play at that higher level, which was great to see. And hopefully will be a cog in that Wake Forest lineup.
Yeah, and Seaver did really well at the collegiate national team too. He cracked the team. At first, I was kind of skeptical because there was some swing and miss there.
Yeah.
He is pretty aggressive at the dish, and he kind of needs to iron that out a little bit. But Seaver King is very twitchy. He could probably play third base for Wake Forest next year because they're not going to have Merrick Houston move off shortstop.
Yeah.
He's their certified shortstop. He's very good defensively there. Maybe be able to put him to second base. So we'll probably split between second and third, but he can play either position. And there's legitimate juice in the bat to the pull side. So Seaver King's my click to pick next year. Personally, that's just me. He's in a very, very good development fit to essentially just light the ACC on fire next year with Nick Kurtz.
Yeah. And I mean, when you have those guys that can kind of play all over the place, that's huge at the college level. I mean, even a lot of times it's more of a utility type player, but when you have a guy that has the potential of Seaver King to be like a first rounder and have those skill sets, I mean, that's just insane to have in your lineup. I think when I was at Nevada, we had a guy who played third, short, and second, but nowhere near draft eligible. And so when you have this guy who's just going to be top of the order type bat for you, I mean, that's huge.
Absolutely. And the versatility helps so much.
Yeah.
It really does. Another guy that did really well on the Cape, at least in my opinion, like Derek Bender, Coastal Carolina's, I guess, backup catcher and first baseman. Like, he's blocked by Caden Bodine down there in Conway. He splits time catching. He'll primarily be first base or he'll be DH. There's not a ton of defensive versatility. I don't know if he's really a catcher at the next level, but he's going to at least be attempted there. But the bat's legit. There's not a ton of swing and miss. He does expand his zone a little bit, but there's enough power in the bat to potentially be plus, and it plays to all fields. I think everybody knows Derek Bender now from the Cape footage of him admiring his home run in the championship series and getting into it with the catcher and the umpire. But Derek Bender's a pretty fun bat to watch in person. He doesn't walk much, which kind of does need to be toned down a bit, and he does need to work on that. But there's just so much power in that bat. It's hard to ignore the offensive upside in that kind of profile.
Yeah. You have to love guys like that. When you talk about guys who struggled, though, we do have to talk about Tanner Witt. He was a guy last year's draft who kept falling. People were wondering why. You look at his numbers in the Cape. It was only 5 games, but he had 11.93 ERA. There's 11 strikeouts in 14 innings, but there was 9 walks also, and he was just getting absolutely torched for 19 earned runs over those 14 innings. Not impressive. Guy who had a lot of upside, but just seems to not be able to find it right now.
Yeah, and the main thing with Tanner Witt was he's obviously coming back from TJ, and I feel like Texas definitely rushed that coming back.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like an agent thing in terms of like what Prelip was, where Prelip's agent wanted him to go ahead and just take it easy, do bullpens. That's probably the best way to maximize your value. Tanner Witt's value plummeted after he got back from TJ, mainly because of the fact that he was throwing essentially like 88, 89 when he was throwing like 92, 94 prior to surgery. Plus, he couldn't throw strikes like you mentioned. All the pitch shapes are pretty much still the same. The curveball is pretty vertical. There's a pretty like the IVB on the fastball is insanely loud. It's like 20 inches of vertical break, but it doesn't really help you miss bats when you're throwing in the zone like 50% of the time. Which that's the big thing that I've learned with fastballs and whiffs is like, depending on the kind of shape that you have on the fastball and how much you throw in the zone, how many bats are you going to miss? If you're not throwing the ball enough in the zone, you're not going to miss that many bats, despite the fact that like you have the most explosive fastball that anybody's ever seen. And the same can be said for like two seamers and such, but that's a different story. But that's probably the biggest issue with Tanner Witt now is like he needs to build up the velo. He needs to build up the strike throwing. And if he comes out in the spring and is pitching better than he did even before surgery, like that's going to be a premium arm that might go on day one. But as of right now, it's really tough to envision Tanner Witt as like a maybe even a top 75 college guy right now.
Yeah.
Like I just don't see it at the moment.
And that's the hard thing with the pitchers, right? You can get that fall off a cliff, an injury happens. Next thing you know, you lose some velocity. That it's a struggle to come back. So, I mean, all hoping for that he has some offseason to really build up the arm strength and get back out there and see what he can do for Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Texas too, getting Witt and LeBaron Johnson coming back too was also a bit of a shock to me. They're going to have a pretty dangerous 1-2 combo in that rotation down in Austin. Because I want to say Johnson threw like 130 pitch shutout against Miami in regional play, I do believe. I could be mistaken on that, but it was they really leaned on Johnson in that regional down in Coral Gables, and then well, they went to Stanford, I think, for the Supers. I could be wrong. I think on that one. Okay. Oh, that's right, because Quinn Matthews with the 160.
Yeah, the 100 million pitches in one outing.
Yeah.
Hey, it helped his draft stock.
That did.
Like people will say, "Oh, too many pitches." That's something I think actually helped because teams see a guy out there going out there and dominating for that long. That helps your draft stock. Whether you think, "Oh, you're utilizing his arm too much," whatever. I mean, I think that's something that teams looked at.
Yeah, and I think I'm not trying to defend the decision at all. I think having him out there was for that much was pretty stupid.
Yeah.
But I understand the circumstances. Coaches get put in that corner because of the fact that with the format that they have for regionals and super regionals, like you go through pitching like crazy.
Yeah.
And you're kind of put in that position. It's like, well, do I use this guy for the third time in 3 days, or do I go ahead and just see how long the starter goes and goes from there? I think Tanner Hall was another one where he threw like a 9-inning game that Friday in Auburn, and then pitched the elimination game on that Monday. Because they had to come through the losers bracket and wasted all their pitching.
Like, at some point it's just like, got an arm, all right, you're going.
Yeah, it's annoying. I don't like it, but it's a snowball effect from the format that they have. And I've said it before, and I'll just keep saying that just because I think that's the reason why coaches are put in that position. Is like, I know some coaches don't want to do it, but there's no other way to really, you're in playoff territory and you're trying to compete to win.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
And then if you get bumped into the losers bracket too, it's even worse because you have to find your way out and somehow win 2 games against whoever the undefeated seed is.
So, yeah. Or you can even go 3 games. It's like, it's a weird format. I kind of do want there to be some changes to it so they can limit usage like that.
Yeah.
Or at least make it follow like guidelines from USA Baseball or something. I don't know. Like, just make it simpler so that way we can enjoy guys not blowing out as often. Because overuse is definitely one of the biggest things that I worry about in this game right now.
Yeah, 100%. Moving on to a more positive note, we know that you are working on some top 50 boards. They're about to get released here shortly. I know you're working on a prep school one, right, and a college one. Are there some names that are on that list, or are there any insights you want to give us to the boards before they drop?
Yeah, so the first thing I kind of want to cover with the boards first, I know we did a top 150 or top 200, I think is what Joe had back in like March or April before he left. We're backscaling to top 50 each. It was just the easiest thing for us to do because it's not just me doing this. This is a whole effort from, you were part of it, Rekka, Will, Blake, Jonathan, Patrick Bauer, who we just had come in from TCU, have all been putting in effort to get this done. And we felt like if we did a top 200, we're just putting ourselves into territory where we were before, where we were kind of rushing to get everything done. We didn't want to do that again. So we want to start off small, go back into this. Like, we're going to do separate lists. And then in January, either January or February, we haven't decided on a time yet. we're going to congeal everything into one big board, maybe go to like 300 or 400, and then just call it there. Because admittedly, we aren't what the old regime used to be.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of stuff going on. I'm in school. I've had stuff I've had to deal with. Will has a second job. Breck has a second job. We're all very busy with what we do. And we just don't have the time at this point. Like I'm struggling with my own day job at this point. Like, but that was kind of like where we're coming from in terms of like, we want to ease ourselves into this and then just make it as stress-free as we possibly could. Because we were really, really stressed at the end of 2023. So I figured I'd just say that first and foremost. We'll expand the top 100 list probably later on in the winter. And then as we get closer to spring, we'll probably congeal everything in the one list and then go from there. Yeah. We'll see how it works. I'm excited for it. We're going to be debuting these lists later this week, and the podcast will come after it. A couple of guys with the prep list that I'm kind of keen on. Now, granted, the prep class this year is not as good as it was last year. There's no like Walker Jenkins or Max Clark at the top of the board or someone similar to it. Like Connor Griffin, Noah Franco, and Cam Caminetti were all 2025 reclasses. And I feel like the 2025 class is still better than this one. Levi Sterling is the best arm in the class. There's no doubt about it in my mind. It's a very, very polished delivery, very polished arsenal. And it's one of the best changeups in the prep class right now. And he's also going to be extremely young for the class. He won't even be 18 until 2 months after the draft in 2024. So he's going to be a model darling. Derek Curiel is a little bit lower on the list. We're just waiting to see if Derek Curiel actually has a bit more impact in the spring. There is a bit of prospect fatigue there, and he's still very projectable. I think he's going to add some weight over the off season and come out in the spring and starts pummeling balls over the fences and whatnot. But as of right now, we're still waiting to see that happen. But he's still in our top 10. He's going to be there with how good of a defender that he is. Carter Johnson's the big riser we have on the hitting side. We think he's the next Colt Emerson. And I know we talked about it earlier, but it's a pretty similar swing from the opposite side of the plate. Love the bat path. I think there's already power there, or at least like average to maybe even above average power in that bat as it is right now. We really love Carter Johnson, and Christian Chatterton's the other guy that we really love too. He's pretty maxed out in terms of physicality. He's like 6 foot, 195, pretty muscular as it is, but it's also a pretty legit fastball up to 95 with a really good changeup and a potentially plus curveball. Like, it's hard to ignore the stuff in that scenario to be like, well, it is what it is. Okay, well, it is what it is now, but he's up to 95 with 2 very good breaking balls. Like, you can't ignore that.
No.
So yeah, those are the main guys we've pushed onto this list. There's a couple others at the bottom that we're pushing up, like Braylon Dowdy, who popped the area codes, was a really, really good one I wanted to put on here. Garrett Scholl from Enid, Oklahoma is another one. Mason Brassfield, who had a very loud PG All-American game on the mound, was another one I wanted to push up. There's a lot of interesting arms in this class. Admittedly, it's not top heavy, but there's some interesting depth in this class, especially on the arm side. So, do you have any comments on the prep side, sir?
No, none that I could think. I'm not as good as the prep stuff. I pay more attention to the college game. I'm still starting to get back into to learn more about the prep class. To me, the college guys that really stand out, they're kind of the ones that we've talked about for the Chase Burns and the Vance Honeycutt from North Carolina and all those guys. Those are the ones that are really sticking out to me. I'll be interested to kind of see who kind of pops up on the board from Wake Forest. I mean, you have Nick Kurtz, you have Seaver King. It seems like you have the entire team basically that's always draft eligible. So I'm really excited to get into the college play and actually see some games happen and action happen. So excited for the season to come up.
Same here, and we got some pretty big plans for the spring too.
Yeah.
I know second week of the season they got the college showdown in Dallas. I think it's like Oregon State, Oklahoma State, Arkansas, and Michigan. I do believe is the lineup. We're gonna try and have someone there for that. I'm not too sure who it's going to be just yet, but there is going to be an actual attempt to go out there because personally, I would really love to see Bazana in person. Blake's already seen him on the Cape.
Mm-hmm.
Bazana is number one in the college rank, by the way, for us.
Yeah.
So might as well dive into that now, actually. It's a very, very deep class. If we congealed everything into one singular list now between prep and college would probably dominate the entire top 15, I think. It's that strong of a class. There are some interesting developments we have on here. I know we had Jack Hegley known as 1-1 back in the March or April update that we did. He's going to be at 10 on this list. There is a reason why we did this, and it's not because we don't like Cags. There's a ton of upside here. It's just he's more raw than anything else, and the bat's too aggressive. He doesn't draw walks. He swings at like a 45% chase rate. And on the mound, yes, it's 99 from the left side. It's just, he doesn't throw enough strikes.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. I want to see a bit more polish in that profile before I can say like, oh, hey, by the way, he's 1-1. Because he's first base only defensively. And I'd say as a pitcher right now, it might just be a relief profile. If he improves strike throwing this year and improves the approach, I will eat my words. Like 100%. It's just right now it's hard for me. Yeah, go ahead. I'll own it if I'm wrong, but just right now it's hard to really put him any higher than say number 10 on this list.
Yeah.
But hey, if everything works out, 1-1. It's a two-way player who's very, very good on both sides of the ball. That's the upside here.
I feel like just because he had a really hot season, right? And he gets the comparisons to Shohei Ohtani because every two-way guy does now. And I think that's a lot of the reason it's like, okay, does he living up to the sensation that he's creating on the internet? That's the other thing that people always kind of ignore. They see him on TV. He's hitting these mammoth home runs. He's throwing 99 from the left. You're like, oh, this is the second coming of Ohtani. But when you look at the deeper picture, like you just went into right there, I mean, there's more to it than just that.
Yeah, there's a lot more under the hood that kind of really shows itself pretty easily. And I feel like the Ohtani comps kind of hurt him a bit because now you're expecting him to be that player.
Yep. Good luck.
And he's not really at that level yet, which is no disrespect to Cags at all.
There's no one's at Ohtani level at all.
Yeah, Ohtani is his own thing at this point. He's the best player in the world. It's kind of hard to really tell a college guy like, hey, you're going to be the next Ohtani. He'd probably be like, that's a bit lofty for me myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's definitely one that might surprise people a little bit, and we'll dive into it later on in the year with a full-on analysis piece on him, just to give more in depth on here's our thoughts and here what can be fixed and how should it be fixed. So figure at least get the elephant out of the room on that one.
The one guy sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say the one guy I really like is Nick Kurtz from Wake Forest. I mean, you got double plus power there. Just a really good eye at the plate. Has an incredible feel for the strike zone. And he's just a guy that really has taken off. And I'm really excited to see him again. I got to see Wake Forest in the regional when they played Maryland a couple of years ago. But he's just really skyrocketed his way up draft boards. And is really impressive.
He's also probably the best defensive first baseman I've seen since.
Really good.
I mean, he's definitely the best one I've ever seen in person. But in terms of a scouting comparison, the best one since Evan White from Kentucky. That's probably the best defensive first baseman I can think of off the top of my head.
Prayers this bat does not turn out to be Evan White's.
Oh my God! If it does, I'm gonna cry. I love Nick Kurtz. Like
Yeah.
that's a very fun bat. Trying to think of another one that kind of stands out. So Mike Sirota from Northeastern is one that sticks out for me. He's the best mid-major bat in the class. I don't think there's any way of like writing it up other than that. Very well-rounded, good power, good hit tool. He could play corner outfield, I do believe. I could be mistaken on that, but I don't think he's really played center field just yet. He's going to be very young for the class. He will just turn 21 by the time the draft comes around. All he needs to do is perform. Like if he's hitting 400 plus in conference play in the Colonial or Coastal or whatever it is now, he's a first rounder.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be really, really, really good. Some guys at the bottom of the list that we wanted to push up. Ben Hess at 32 is definitely one of my favorite arms. It sucks that he was injured pretty early in the season. I think it was like late March. He had a forearm strain. But if he comes healthy in 2024, he's going to be one of the best arms in the class. I really enjoy the arsenal he has. It's a really good fastball with 3 really good off-speed pitches. He can throw strikes, and if he didn't get injured, he'd probably be up there with Chase Burns or Brody Bright. That's the best arms in the class. So that he was one that I really wanted to keep on the board. Same for Santucci. Santucci, if he comes back healthy in 2024, he's going to be another one that pushes his way up boards. And then there was an arm from UC San Diego. I think people have touched on it before. Ryan Forcucci is his name. He's a really interesting data darling guy. It's a 2-pitch mix with a really explosive fastball in the mid-90s and a pretty firm gyro slider. Good strikes, working on a changeup. But the delivery kind of reminds me a bit of like a Joe Ryan is probably the best way I could describe it. It's shorter arm action, but like it's an interesting delivery to watch on film, and that was like the first comparison that came to my mind when I watched it.
Yeah.
So
but that's a really good overview of the boards, which will also lead us into our last segment, the newest segment of the new podcast that we are going to launch. We got On the Clock with Tyler Jennings. We're going to do 30 seconds of rapid fire every single podcast with Tyler, usually 5 questions that we're going to throw at him. So are you ready?
Let's do this.
All right. The first one is, who's your number 1 overall pick right now?
Travis Bazzana. It's not close right now, I think. And the thing with Bazzana was he lit up the Cape, did a very, very good job of it. It's a very good bat, pull side power, field to hit, healthy contact rates, solid exit velocities, and he's going to get a chance to play shortstop, I do believe. So I love the profile here with Bazzana.
Love it. Biggest sleeper in the draft right now?
Ooh, this was one I took a bit of time to think about, but I've already touched on it, but Ben Hess. With how volatile pitching is, it's not a guarantee, but I touched on it. Really good fastball, really good secondaries, throw strikes, big, durable frame. I think if he stays healthy next year, he's going to be somewhere in potentially back in the first round, maybe even higher than that.
This answer could be the same one. Dark horse college prospect.
Now I'll change it on this one. Jonathan Santucci. I don't know if we can really call him dark horse because it will still be high on the list, but it's 3 really good pitches, easy delivery from the left side, misses bats, throw strikes. I really enjoy Jonathan Santucci, and I feel like he's a first rounder.
Love it. Dark horse high school prospect.
Going a bit out of whack here, Tyler Head out of Florida. NC State commit, pretty wiry frame, has pretty good bat speed and feel for the barrel. I think he's going to grow into his frame, and there's going to be more power coming from the left side. It's a sweet swing. He's going to be my pick to click in 2024.
I think you only went with him because of his name. I'm just going to go with that.
I mean, that's fine. Or you can even make the NC State connection. I don't care. Like, call me out.
He's a Tyler needs NC State connection. That's it. That's the reason he's the dark horse high school prospect. No other reasoning. All right, Last one. Wake Forest or LSU in 2024?
LSU. Hate to say it for Wake. I still love you guys, but just the work that LSU put in with the portal, again, Luke Holman, Michael Braswell, a couple of others. I think Cade Woods was another one from Alabama. they've reloaded. I think they're going to be just as good, if not better, in 2024. Wake may have a little bit of regression from the team that they had this year, but I still think they're going to be top 5 in the country next year, both teams.
Hard to go against LSU, even with Chase Burns, Josh Hartle, Nick Kurtz, Seaver King. Wake Forest is going to be good. They're going to be real good. But I mean, it's hard to go against the champs.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for the first episode of On the Clock. As always, I'm Jared Perkins. That's Tyler Jennings. Tyler, before we head out, are there any products we should be plugging for the draft besides the top 50 boards?
Yeah, the other thing, we have a playlist on the YouTube channel under 2024 Draft Prospects. So we're going to be posting on not only the top 50 list, but I'll also promote it on the Twitter as well. So I'll get that up and running, and we're going to be uploading a video throughout the winter. I've got some videos still to go through from PDP and Collegiate National Team. And Will's got a couple guys from East Coast Pro he wants to put up there, plus any fall ball we do.
Cool.
So I'll post that up there at some point. Also, make sure to still buy the prospect handbook for 2023. I know the year's done and we're kind of focusing more on next year at this point, but the handbook's still out there. Feel free to buy it. And we're already starting work on the new one.
Love it. I had an article come out, Transfer Portal 2024. If you want to get to know some of the guys that are draft eligible and might be the top guys on the move, be sure to check out that article. As a reminder, we'll be going every 2 weeks during the offseason, but then we'll be coming to you weekly during the college baseball season. So until next time, we'll see you then.